All right. So, coming up on today's show, we're going to be talking about Blue Protocol, my hands-on impressions. We're also going to be talking about Throne of Liberty versus Ashes Creation and some interesting stuff here. Because if you guys haven't seen the news, Ashes seemingly is now having their Alpha 2 delayed to 2024. But there's other things that they're doing.
Was there no evidence of this?
Oh, no, they haven't. Well, like I've been saying with that date now, because a lot of speculation was it was going to be this year, like this summer, perhaps. And I was like, okay, well, Alpha 2, maybe 2025. I might even be reevaluating my Ashes release date from 2025 to 2026 now, or maybe even later than that. But they're very open about their game and showing it off and doing all these different things. Throne of Liberty, have absolutely no clue, but the news on that one is Amazon kicks off their internal alpha test of Throne of Liberty this week. And we actually had that confirmed, which is really exciting to see. And then, especially as the show goes on, if we have plenty of time, I got some comments, some questions, and things like that to highlight from the Final Fantasy XIV 6.4 live letter. So be sure to check out the podcast, the videos, the live stream, all that. Chris is live over on Twitch Monday through Friday. I've been doing a community game day once a month on a Saturday, and that is essentially what you need to know about who we are. To kick the show off right, Chris, this weekend, Blue Protocol, Japanese network test. I was able to play the game, and I love the technology that we have nowadays because I can take screenshots of the game and it translates it for me so I can figure out exactly what I need to do and what I need to know. But I was able to go hands-on with this game, and there's a few key takeaways that I'd like to highlight for your input here because I think this is interesting. The thing that I can't shake, the thought that I cannot shake having played Blue Protocol this weekend is that I feel like Blue Protocol is going to be a perfect marriage between that game and Final Fantasy XIV. It is different enough that it invites a less competition mindset. It doesn't require a subscription. It's a free-to-play MMO. But it is MMO. It is very Japanese in that regards. So I feel there will be a natural correlation of people who like Final Fantasy who might also really enjoy Blue Protocol. And in that vein, when we've just been coming off of all like the recent, frustrations that certain, content creators or communities have voiced, et cetera, this could be that perfect kind of like game that you play alongside of Final Fantasy 14 so that you're never feeling like you're leaving 14, but you're still enjoying Blue Protocol for a different reason, and it's not necessarily taking away. However, I'd be interested in your thoughts in that regards because of the nature of it being a brand new game, just getting started. Do you think, from everything I've just shared right now, what's your takeaway?
So to be a naturally paired game with 14, I think that the 2-year expansion cycle is something that would be really nice to know about. I've seen people say that New World could pair well with 14. I've seen people say that Guild Wars could pair well with 14. But a lot of times, like what ends up happening is eventually you end up with some big content drop where they're timed at the same time. And then you have to decide which one's your primary game because it's really hard to balance patch week if they both patch in the same week. Yeah. So is there a content update plan? Do they have a roadmap as far as like how often they plan on rolling out new content?
Excellent question. They do. Is it shared? No. And so we don't know yet what that cadence is, but but that's an excellent point. With any launch of any game, especially games as a service, it really comes down to putting out, that consistent content update. So we don't know yet what the rollout is. We do know that it's going to have that Battle Pass seasonal model. So roughly speaking, you could probably start to expect, and I might be misquoting it, so just label this as speculation until I can confirm again. But it seemed like the battle passes were kind of set to either 60 or 90 days. So it could end up being this natural cadence of every 2 months to every 3 months that you're going to get content, that you're going to have something new to work on in the game. And that could line up, especially if it ends up being every 2 months. If it was offsetting to where you're like, hey, here's the Final Fantasy patch, and then now you have a gap, that splits between, it could end up having that ping pong style effect. Because you're right, at some point, if the update happens exactly at the same time, you have to make a choice. And that's actually what happened with me when I realized that I think I was finally ready to step away from Final Fantasy. There was a patch for New World and there was a patch for Final Fantasy, and I was like, oh, I want to spend time in column A more than I realize I want to spend than I even realize. So that's, yeah, once we have a hard set date and stuff like that, I'm sure that we'll have more to kind of really compare apples to apples on. But overall gameplay wise, it kind of gave me that Destiny style feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that Destiny is like a perfect comparison, because Destiny promises to be this secondary game that allows you to have this drastically different play experience that have elements of it, such as the loot system and the storytelling and all these things that feel very at home for an MMO player. They're like, hey, I'm still figuring out this shooting thing. I'm still trying to understand the loot system, but there are elements of it that feel very easy to adjust to. And all of the frustration comes from content cadence. And so I think it's a perfect parody, because that's my concern with any new MMO. Any new MMO is what are they going to do after the initial content? Yes, there is this huge amount on launch, and then we all play it 10 hours a day, every day for 100 days in a row, and then there's nothing. When do we get more? How often do we get more? What does the word more mean? Is more something for every type of player? Are they focusing on one type of player? Is there new story with every patch? Is the story every other patch? Is the story voiced? Is the story big and meaningful? Is it building to something? Is it building to expansions? Is it finished being told in raids? Or is it something that can be experienced entirely solo? I find it wildly frustrating that Dragonflight was something I enjoyed the storytelling. And then you get to the end and they're like, and there's a boss. And you're like, can I see it? And they're like, no, it's in the raid. And the raid doesn't drop. And then I was like, well, that sucks. And then Destiny drops their new expansion. I was like, wow, I'm having a lot of good times. And there are people that are upset with both these games, but I was having a good time in my personal experience. And in both cases, I got to the end and went, where's the rest? Because it was with this raid that isn't there on launch. So like, those are questions that, like, when a new MMO comes out, that's something that happens on developed teams that are good at releasing their game. They know what a game is. They've got a marketing machine. They've got servers. They've got all these hard things to figured out. They've got money parked in all these people. And when a new MMO comes out, it's like, I don't even know if you have working servers. I don't even know if you have a battle system that doesn't just break. I don't know if you can handle the load testing of like a lot of people. And so like, I have all these bigger questions for a new. So if I can't trust you on those things, then like, what are you going to do as opposed to going with something like Guild Wars or Destiny or Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft, where like, at least I know day and date the expansion will largely work.
Yeah. And you bring up a really interesting point, because one of the things that we constantly see is that overconsumption of launch content, which there's no fixing that, right? Everybody's excited. They want to play. Maybe they've scheduled time off, and assuming the servers hold up, which I have to say, like, the stability for me playing from America to Japan was like really good. Like I thought that connection wise, the network test, they crushed it for the protocol. But in terms of that, we know the overconsumption. What will be interesting to see is the answer to that question, because you cannot create 10 years of content at the time of your launch. You can have a massive game, but that still will be consumed. It's all about those updates and that cadence. And one of the things that we saw with Final Fantasy at launch is they had updates very frequently. In fact, even to this day, for those of us who were a part of that ARR launch, who remembers and felt like every update was significant and exciting, and then it's like, now you look and it's like, yeah, you are actually getting a lot of content. There's a lot of things over here, but they're not necessarily maybe have that big impact for a veteran player who has been a part of this so many times. So in Blue Protocol's case, the strength that they could have is quicker updates, like maybe getting to that roadmap to where we are going to be in this cadence of, like, let's say every 3 months. That seems to be a normal, natural cadence that people are looking towards in terms of how seasons and what's all going on in the real world. But imagine having them launch, and then if nothing else, like every week, every 2 weeks, it's like, hey, we're adding this now. Oh, we're adding a couple new floors. It doesn't have to be so massive, but it has to be like, hey, by the way, and for a player coming in, imagine starting in week 2, week 3, week 4, and just being a new player then, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, there's an update and all this new stuff for new players is already out. You're like, oh, I haven't even got to the stuff that was at launch, and there's making more. And that could essentially kind of drive a lot of hype, a lot of excitement for the game itself.